So continuing with the vector component of Photoshop, we'll do a brief review of using the pen tool to do this exercise, and then we'll work with shape layers. Okay. Again, this is what the final is supposed to look like. Retro toy we brought in the other day, the little flying saucer, and I'm going to cheat because, well, I guess I can't cheat. I thought, no, I saved it the other day. So let me go ahead and open up that file. It's right here. I want this one here to be opened. There we go. So I'll just close this one. So this is my start file. I've already brought in the saucer by using the pen tool. I'll go ahead and turn it off. We have these other layers that we can use as a guide. I want the retro shape, that boomerang shape. That's what I want to work on now, which is using the pen tool also, just to create a shape layer though. So instead of using it to make a selection, I'm going to turn that off for our star guide, because that's something a little bit different. So once again, we're going to use the tools down here. I'm going to use the pen tool, but this time, and this is the important difference, last time I selected this middle one that selected paths, and after making the paths, I turned them into selections, and that's how I brought the little spaceship over. This time, I'm going to select this one, which is a shape layer, and similar to using the type tool, when you use shape layers, they're automatically put on their own layer. Okay? So similar to what we had done the other day, I'm going to use the pen tool, and whatever is our foreground color will be the color that fills. So I'm going to swap foreground and background because I want it to fill with white. And this is how this works in here. We just say we want to click, go from point A to point B, and then click and go from point C to D, and as soon as I release, notice it starts to fill from each of these anchor points. And when it fills, notice over in layers, see what's happening here. It says a shape. This is the shape layer. It is independent of everything else. Now I'm going to click on D. Whoops, and I just goofed. Let me undo a minute. There we go. Now let's go undo. Let's go to the next point and drag to here. And then let's go to here and drag to here. And now we see this through here, and we click and we drag. So we get this little boomerang shape is what it is. And then we go back to A again. And when we do go back to the starting point, remember what I told you on Monday? You see the little circle underneath the icon, and that turns it into a closed path. And if you wish to come back and edit any of these anchor points, you use the direct selection tool, select any one of those points, and we can pull and drag on the tangent handle, or if I wanted to actually really significantly change the configuration of the shape, I could just simply move the anchor points as well. Remember, we have other tools to actually control whether these are curved points or they come to an abrupt change in direction. Pretty nice. It works pretty well for the most part. And notice when we're done with it, it makes a vector, a shape vector over here in our path layer, similar to what we had before. But it's more important to notice that what we didn't have before is that we didn't have the shape layer, which could be turned on and off. Now we can come back, and if I want to change the color of this, if I decided, you know what, white isn't the color I want, you double click on this little icon here, and it brings up your color palette, and if I want to turn it red, it turns it red. If you want it blue, any other color, you can change that color by just double clicking there. If I want to come back and I want to add points, remove anchor points, edit anchor points, I can do so by making sure that the layer is selected using the direct selection tool down here, selecting the anchor points and or the tangent handles and manipulating them. Now, here's something that shape layers can do that you can't do otherwise. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you create a new layer and start doing it?
No, it automatically, like type, it automatically generates a new layer for you. So if you start with a new layer, it's not going to help you because it will automatically, it's just going to be an empty layer. Notice the little star-shaped hole that's cut through here. Okay? This is what shape layers and shapes in general can do. I'm going to select a shape again, but this time I'm going to select the Polygon Tool. And with the Polygon Tool, what I'm going to do is, I got to remember where the heck it is myself. Hold on here. We got 5 sides. Let me double click on it, and that's not helping me. Where's our star shape? Huh? Is it right here and I'm just not seeing it?
No, see where the tab was? Up on the top.
Go ahead.
You're on it, but I think they have it.
Yeah, it's on the side.
Well, this is a custom shape tool, which gives us access to a whole bunch of these different ones down here. If I select this one, number of sides, what am I forgetting? Because right now it'll make, well, it is making a star shape, but I mean that's kind of nice, but I don't want a 5-pointed star. I want one that has more sides. So all I have to do is select in here. Say I wanted 8 sides. And now when I click and I drag, I have an 8-sided, 8-pointed star. But notice what I have selected here. It's a brand new shape. It's on the same layer as the other one, and when you overlap them, they just sort of combine with one another, although they are independent. That's not what I want to do. I want to poke a hole through it, and that's what these guys are for in a minute. So I'm going to select this one with the Path Selection tool and delete that one. And I'm going to select the tool again. Why am I just not seeing it? Huh. I'll come to this in a minute. There are all these other shapes in here that we want. So if I go back to this one, 8 sides, but it could be an octagon, and it's an 8-pointed star, and there's a place where we go to change that. Why am I not getting it? Double click? No. It might be up here. Just not seeing it. Okay. So anyway, I have my 8-sided star. But this time I want it to poke a hole. Notice what these options do here. This one creates a brand new shape. This one will combine the two together. This one will subtract the bottom shape from the top shape from the bottom shape. This one will create an intersection, or the difference between those two. Okay, and this one does just the opposite. So I want to actually poke a hole through it. Now watch what happens. It really doesn't matter the color of my star, but watch what happens when I click and I drag on here. It creates a knockout. Now why is this neat? And it is a useful tool, and it's something you can do in Illustrator, so it's not a big deal. But it is nice in Photoshop is that I can select that, and it's kind of like a cartoon, you know, where they paint a hole in the floor, and then then the other character falls in it. Well, it's what we're doing, and then they move the hole someplace else so that they don't fall in it. That's what we're doing. We can move the hole around. It's pretty cool. So that is nice. It's a nice component to this. And again, if you decide that you don't want it, after all, you can delete that shape, and you haven't reconfigured, permanently altered your boomerang shape. You can add multiple shapes on there, different sizes, different configurations that subtract. Lots that you can do with that. So that's why that's nice. Okay, so it's important to note when you're doing this, when you're building a shape, okay, which of these are you using? Which of these shapes are you using? Are you using a path, or are you using a shape layer? Okay, because that by default, shape layer is selected, and that may not be what you want. Maybe you just want to make a selection. And you don't need to use one of these predetermined shapes to make a shape layer. You can use the pen tool. If I select the pen tool, notice that I have the same options here: shape layer and selection. Okay? So let's come back here and let's turn off our guides here, clean that up a little bit. Let's deselect the path so that cleans that up. One of the things that I touched on by accident here, not by accident, but I just ahead of time, is there are some custom shapes that are available here that can be useful in designing web pages. If you have your own shape that you want to create that's a logo of a company that you use frequently, and you want it to be a vector so that it can be resized without worrying about resolution, because that is the advantage to using vector shapes. It can only be 2D, it can only be flat graphic shapes that work well with vector graphics. But the advantage is that you can resize them infinitely, and they take very small file size to use them. Okay? So if you look at the final, you'll notice that they have these little checkerboard shapes. Well, that's what we're going to do here. But where we find these is from the custom shape. And you'll notice over here, with custom shape selected, well, maybe that should have been here. If I select that, that's where it is. I was expecting over there. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. So I have my custom shape selected, and now you click on this little drop-down menu. And these are all the custom shapes that come in here by default. Little dog paws, if you want, little cartoon balloons, copyright, little blobs, hearts, all kinds of stuff. There are also considerably more that are available to us, and you find these by using this fly-out window here, this little button. And you'll notice that there are a whole bunch of these down here, from ornaments to frames to music, nature. So let's find one from nature here. And if you click OK, it will replace this library with a new library. If I just select append, it will add those elements to the existing library. And you'll notice that I have here all sorts of elements, from maple leaves to butterflies to all sorts of stuff. So for example, if I want the little maple leaf, and the same thing, if I wanted to poke a hole through here, let's close that. We select that shape, and I come over here. Let's make sure that this one is selected. And why isn't it giving me the option? Shape layer. Okay, I want to subtract, and it won't let me select it. Okay, let me go ahead and create the new one. Now I can combine them. So now if I select these two, for example, this one and this one, come on. Nope, treats it, it's on a separate, on its own layer. So that's not helping me here. Why can't I, let me select both this way then. Now we'll select this one. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, one of those days I'm not having very good luck here. Okay. Let's get rid of this layer. Now it will let me do it. It will let me combine, or it will allow me to subtract. So now if I subtract, come on, why won't you do it? Maybe because it won't allow, I should be able to have multiple shapes on here. Let me go ahead and throw this one away. Let me try this again. I got this layer selected, and I have the mask selected itself. Maybe that's why it wouldn't allow it. If I select this one, okay, now let's try. Select this. No? Huh. That's it. I had to make sure that I selected the mask portion. And you'll notice now my combo effects are available. Does that make sense? Took me a moment too. So let's go ahead and click and drag here so that it subtracts and it didn't subtract because I need to select that one. So let me undo. Let's select, subtract. There we go. Let's try it again. Hold down the Shift key to constrain. There we go. So once again, it allows us to add that to the existing shapes. So we could have as many as you want and cut, poke holes in there. Or make it a separate shape, or combine it, or create the difference. So if I were to do, undo as an example, let's go back. Oh, where's my history? History. There we go. Let's go back a couple steps. So for example, go back to layers again. Make sure that the mask part of this is selected. Select this custom shape again. This time, let's select difference. Now watch what happens when I overlap them. See, the only part that's visible is where they overlap. So that would be a possible, or just the difference. So another possibility would be to select difference. Where they overlap, we have a hole. And again, the advantage to that is if you decide that you need to resize or move things later, it moves the hole. And it also is an advantage because if you decide you don't want the maple leaf afterwards, you delete it and it's gone. And it leaves everything else intact. So there are advantages to using vectors. But as I mentioned on Monday, I really think it is better if you have Illustrator that you use it. And when we were talking about type, I mentioned that Illustrator has much better type tools than Photoshop does. And so what they've done is they created some type in Illustrator and we opened it. Well, I'm going to close this and I'm going to open it. I'm going to open it again. And you can open Illustrator files into Photoshop. So either it can be open already or I can go File, Open. And I'm going to go to Lesson 9 and scroll over. And you'll notice I see a title file, .ai. AI stands for Adobe Illustrator. And when I click Open, when you open an Illustrator file in Photoshop, watch what happens. And this is important. It shows you what's visible. This is what it's going to open. And then it asks you, name, so we can name this, page options, so we'll name it, we'll leave it title. Anti-alias is good. It doesn't have to be, but that's a good thing. Width and height is unimportant as long as we turn this into a smart object. Now it wants to know the resolution. So now I can click 300. It opens it in its own file. And now when I move it over, let's see. No, it's not a smart object anymore. But I can resize this, Command T. We can shrink it down, make it whatever size we want, and it'll look okay. The way I would prefer to do it, let me go ahead and, come on, where is it? I'm going to drag it over from the Illustrator file itself. So this is by opening the file in Photoshop, and it converts it to a bitmap. And you can make it whatever resolution you want. I think there's a better way to go, though. I want to open it first, not in Photoshop, but in Illustrator. So let me go back to the file, which is an Illustrator file. Oh, come on. There we go here. On my public folder, we go into Photoshop Lessons. We go into Lesson 9. And here's the title, AI file. I'm just going to drag it on top of my AI icon, and it loads it in Illustrator. So I have two applications open. I have Photoshop open, and I have Illustrator open. And this will work either way. I can drag Photoshop files into Illustrator, or I can drag Illustrator files into Photoshop. But what I want you to do is to pay attention to what happens when I drag the Illustrator file into Photoshop. It will ask me if I want to turn it into a smart object. And it doesn't do that when you open up the file. So watch what happens now. If I simply select the file, and it happens to be, let's Let's select both of these so they're both selected. I'm going to drag it over. And when I drag it over and I release it on top of the Photoshop file, notice what it does. I can take and this now. Notice it's a vector smart object. Now I can take this with the transform tool, or just move over it before I'm done, and I can make this as big as I want or as small as I want, and it remains a vector object. And if I wish to rasterize it when I'm done, I can, but I'm not confined to the same rules that I have with bitmap. Remember I said from the start that when you're working especially with high resolution, once you've imported a file, don't make it bigger afterwards. That's not true with smart objects, especially when they've been turned into smart objects from Illustrator. I can make those as big as small as I want and they will hold up just fine. And notice what the smart object looks like. See that little icon in the lower right hand corner, the little cutout tab here? That lets me know that it is a smart object, which is different from, whoops, that's not what I wanted to see. It's this one. By opening it first and dragging it over, it rasterized it. So you may very well have problems enlarging that one that way, because it is already rasterized, it's already a bitmap. So now when you enlarge it, you may see jaggies around the edge. So if I go ahead to transform, and I enlarge it, I hit return, see how it's gotten blurry? No good. So the better way, if you have an Illustrator file, sorry, peanuts at lunch, stuck in my throat. A better way to go is that if you do have Adobe Illustrator and you have Photoshop, that you open both of the applications and you open each file in its respective application. And then you drag one over to the other. Especially going from Illustrator to Photoshop, because it will automatically turn it into a smart object. It recognizes it as a vector object and it keeps it as such. It does not rasterize it. If you want to rasterize it afterwards, simply select the layer, that smart object layer, and then we go to layer and we select rasterize. Rasterize smart object. Okay.
How do we open it to keep it at the center?
Open it in Illustrator
Drag it over.
and then just drag it over. I don't have a cough button. So if you ever watch this tape, you'll see hear all my coughs. Okay. And the last one. I sort of got sidetracked, but I never get it. Is if we go back to our custom objects, I jumped and changed to this one here. But here's this shape. We'll use whatever shape color you have in the foreground. Click and drag. Hold down the Shift key if you want to constrain proportions. And you can make as many of these things as you want. And we can adjust opacity, just like you can with anything else. Okay? So that's the vector part of working with Photoshop. It's similar to Illustrator, but there are some, it just feels different. It's almost identical, but it's not quite the same. Any questions about what I've covered? Anything at all? No? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Probably next Monday I won't lecture because we're pretty far along on the exercises. I'll probably lecture Wednesday. I want to make sure everybody has time to catch up on exercises. So maybe even next week I won't lecture at all. Catch up on exercises. Make sure if you didn't get the postcard project finished and printed and turned in to get that done. And definitely be working on the DVD cover. Okay. And if you need a DVD, a blank, to use to measure the size, I have some. And what I recommend, the way you start your project is the way we started with the postcard project. Know the size first. Create a new file with that size and the correct resolution, and then drag everything that you want in that file into it. And then you know it will be the correct size, the correct resolution. You won't have any problems.
Can we create the wraparound too?
Yeah, it's not just, when I say the cover, it's the complete wraparound. It's a single sheet. So maybe that would be useful on Monday, depending on how far you guys are, to show you how to do a basic layout. Because your front cover is on the right, then you have the spine, and then your back cover is on the left. And when you wrap it around, it goes in the sleeve, and you close the little clamshell thing, the case, and it's right reading. So you need to design front, spine, and back, but it's all one sheet on one sheet. And when you turn it in, put it in a DVD case, put your CD inside it, put it, if you should have gotten your envelopes back, use the same envelope, just change the date and the title of the project. Okay? Okie doke.